Oh, that's spicy. That's spicy.
I think it's important to recognize that individuals
All the
will
conservatives on
have
the right.
political agendas. It's a natural thing, and people should understand their political views. I think where we need to differentiate it is whether a teacher should have a political agenda.
Okay, I see that. I see that.
Diversity or these new sort of terms, I am not for certain types of what so-called diversity when it comes to these new kind of.
What is those types though?
Like critical race theory or some of the gender ideology.
With this definition, critical race theory, this is not being taught in the classroom. Like, this is a college level course where you talk about intersections, different things. The education system that we have built up right now does not look at intersection in this way. A popular course I had was basically Race in the Age of Trump, where they looked at Trump and like the term of racism and just intersecting like how white people view it as well as how black people view it, and like how to have like an honest conversation about race in America without just demeaning each other. What people are trying to implement in your elementary and your middle schools are not CRT framework. At most, you might get something like this in an AP level or dual credit course classes. But here's the thing, those like high level classes are still college, level material.
I'm a first grade teacher, so the
Oh,
conversations
nice.
we're having in class isn't about the socioeconomic nature of the world.
Exactly.
But, we do talk about just what it looks like for different people in different communities.
If a child is sitting there and they happen to be black and you're saying, well, black people such and such and such, I mean, you're really, that's not okay.
I do have to stop you there because that's not really said. It's not said black people do this.
Well,
it's not said Mexicans do this. Again, it's trying to understand from multiple perspectives. That's not saying that every group aligns on the same thought. That's not saying every group is a monolith. What it's saying is, even if you disagree with somebody or you come from a different tradition or a different cultural background, those people's opinions can still be valid.
I'm gonna be honest, as a teacher, especially after COVID and all of that, I don't have time for a political agenda.
Agree.
I'm here trying to catch up with curriculum, pick up my readers.
Exactly. They're underpaid, they're overworked, and they're understaffed. Like, they don't have time to like talk about like who to vote for, all that. They're just trying to teach your kids math, science, and reading.
I teach social emotional skills and all of that.
Exactly.
But I'm not here to kind of, you need to believe this, and that. We're not gonna bash each other, understand you have your own experiences, but we're not gonna come in with an agenda, you can say. And I feel like this idea of parents and their teachers of their political biases and all of this is just all of this fear that is clouding their judgment, clouding.
My own child, first week of school, what pronouns she wanted to go by. I mean, not what's your favorite subject, how can I help you succeed academically?
Who's to say that wasn't a part of the questions too,
Exactly.
And I understand that question could stand
No,
out.
exactly. It's crazy to me that parents think that asking kids their pronouns is like a political agenda. Like, no, we're just trying to make sure we don't misgender your kids.
The trainings are saying this is the framework of how we operate in the classroom. But where did that idea come from?
Because it's based off, it's called a thing called data.
Did you
so
do
that?
No, hold on. A lot of schools have research and development. And so the state also does. My job is not just to make your kid to feel comfortable. I got to make 55 students feel comfortable. And so when your kid comes home and tells you, well, Mom, the teacher said, what's my pronouns? Yeah, I did say, what's your pronoun? I also said, what's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite food? I'm a college professor now. I was previously a third, fourth grade teacher. Teaching third and fourth grade was horrible. Dealing with parents who thought their child was special and should be treated a certain way.
It's so funny to me that you got so many parents are hot and bothered about, what's being taught in classrooms. But a lot of parents won't go to open night. A lot of parents won't go to their kids' plays. A lot of people don't get involved with their kids' like schoolwork. And I feel like that partnership between the parents and the teachers is important because like learning happens inside the classroom for 8 hours a day, then most of the learning happens in the household and all that. So having that rapport is something is important.
Discussion about sexuality doesn't belong.
Oh Lord, this is going to be a heated debate.
When I was in third grade. And it was quite simple. Boys go in this room, girls go in this room, they play a little video on a black and white TV. You see the genitalia and you're like, oh God, I got one.
Okay. They're having conversations like in the third grade. Like, that's right there is kind of sus because like I feel like sexuality at that age, you shouldn't be showing genitalia. I just feel like that's more of just like, hey, girls, boys, birds and the bees. Honestly, that should be left to the parents at that point.
I mean, it's beyond, and there is a push for pleasure-based sex.
I'm lost for words. So like the push for pleasure-based sex, that's obviously they're not targeting kids. They're targeting older adults. She also brought out the numbers too, about like, you know, anonymous numbers. Like those numbers are there for a reason because not all kids got parents that are open-minded. I know many friends in college that their high school curriculum didn't even have like sex, you know, sex ed basically. You're going through puberty and all that. There are no like standard resources, you know, other than parents, you know, to really just help kids go through this. And like, if you don't like it, that's fine. But I mean, that doesn't mean that it's not helping other kids at the end of the day. Like, they're not just anonymous demons that try and prey upon your kids and all that. They're basically like professional paid individuals who are like counselors probably, who've gotten training in that sort of sense to be able to, you know, guide these conversations with kids.
If a 6th grader or a 4th grader is going to be prompted by a teacher, hey, what are your pronouns? As a parent, I should have a heads up about that because they're not even going to understand.
That pronouns are like gender. That's not sexuality. Like sexuality is like hetero, bi, pan, and this is a confusion that a lot of parents have with each other because they often conflate these two as the same thing.
So there is an agreement that sexuality should be talked about in schools. The disagreement is whether it should just be purely heteronormative or if we should include all aspects. I don't think that we're doing demonstrations to encourage children how to have sex, but this is something that we are trying to, again, educate and make them aware that this kind of things happen. And while you grow up, you're going to have to experience somebody who's of this orientation.
Kids are naturally curious, and I think what I'm hearing from you is I understand where you're potentially coming from, but then where's the line between that sex education and introducing them to porn? Because porn can be educational. I was a virgin when I got married, and
like porn has never been educational. I'm just gonna say corn from now on, but basically corn is not being used as a material in classrooms. As much popularity it is at face value, it's very demeaning at the end of the day, and a lot of educators agree like that's not going to fly in schools. We shouldn't demean corn stars or people that have an OF page, but that doesn't mean like we're going to expose more kids to it.
If you haven't tried to kiss a girl to see if you like it or not, then how do you really know that you're not a lesbian? How do you really know that you're not gay if you've never slept with a guy? How do you really know that you want to be in a monogamous relationship if you don't sleep around? And when you start to
no teacher's going to tell you to do that. I feel like at a certain point of age, even if you're curious or whatever, you'll probably know what you like. Like, you might start questioning, like, hey, I have this feeling towards girls. I might have this feeling towards guys. I've never had that feeling. I was just like, I always had that feeling towards girls. It's not like this knock it till you try it is going to, like, be negatively affecting kids, because at the end of the day, kids pretty much know what they like and don't like at a certain point. It's just whenever they start like questioning whatever, that's when I feel like they might need to be guided or have some guidance into that, because at the end of the day, you have parents that don't have that conversation with kids because they grew up in a traditional value like household, and at the end of the day, the kid suffers at it the most because they don't know how to guide these conversations on their own. And I feel like that causes a lot more harm than actually having people to actually sit there and talk to them about it. Now, whether or not it should be a teacher, that's still up for debate. I feel like a third party, you know, like counselor who's been trained professionally, you know, be able to handle this type of, you know, situations to advocate for a kid.
They come home to tell you things. Well, guess what? Those same kids come to school to talk about what you're telling them at home. Well, let me tell you what my mama and daddy did. And look, I don't have time. Your kid is not that important to me, not to be rude. I got like 300 students. Your kid is no more important than the other 299.
I think that this conversation is really interesting, and I think we need to step back and look at why we automatically assume that if we're telling our children about lesbians, gay people, queer people, why do we immediately equivocate that to telling them about what sex is? Here is a book. In this book, there are 2 dads. This book character has 2 dads. And kids, they can be inquisitive, and that's good, right? But also, like, they're gonna be like, cool, there's 2 dads.
That there's a dad and a dad and a mom and a mom, and the culture is teaching all of that. So what we've noticed is that the curriculum in 8th grade and up is a lot deeper than that. It's more like, here is how you can have sex so you do not get pregnant.
I think we're moving into a conversation about comprehensive sex ed. What I am talking about is when I go into this classroom and I'm teaching kids, I'm not going to just teach kids material that is heteronormative.
I feel like just taking the sexuality and all that out of the conversation and just really just exposing kids like, hey, this is what how other people people live, this is how other people feel. Like, it's okay. And I just feel like people need to like stop trying to say like, oh, they're teaching our kids to have sex, they're teaching our kids to do this, that, when that's not really the case.
So would it be okay to include a book with a man having a relationship with a 12-year-old in that book?
Absolutely not.
What? Now
What?
you're equivocating gay people to pedophiles.
No, I'm not.
And no, that's not okay.
That is not.
You're drawing a line that I'm not drawing.
And you're definitely crossing the line.
Yeah, you crossing the line.
I agree. And this is
Several
why I bring it up,
lines.
is who establishes the boundary.
The law.
But what
Period.
law?
There are clear boundaries to what you can and can't teach, as well as like what is okay and not okay in society. There was a time where older people married younger people, especially when you have like, you know, older man marrying a young girl back in the day. That was deemed not okay because at some point people realized like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be marrying this girl that just got her first period. He's trying to say that, oh, but if you're saying that's normal, well, why this normal? But the thing about that is like, that's not sexuality, that's pedophilia. That's like being a pervert. That's being, you know, power norms and all that. Sexuality is more just like who you like is nobody's business, and like you're gonna like whoever you like, and people need to be informed about it.
During class, there were images shown of literal sex acts or describing certain situations that were inappropriate for young children.
We have a belief system at home.
My question is, how old is their children? If they're like teenagers and stuff, at the end of the day, they can pull this stuff on TikTok. It's like so easily accessible. And that goes to the society standard. Like, you know, we live in a hyper-sexualized society. I agree with that notion. But it's just like you getting mad at school districts for like teaching your kids or whatever. But they're probably being exposed to this on their phones and stuff. Now, I don't know what type of pictures or images being exposed to her children and all that, but I know for my class during our, you know, sex ed time, they literally just had clip art, like literal drawings for our classes.
And the children want to break the boundaries of that belief system naturally because we're human beings, trying to confine them to a set of beliefs to say, this is what is right in our home. And we're seeing the schools get funding from Planned Parenthood. They tried to pass a bill to put medical facilities to offer abortions in high schools here in California. And it's gradual, right? It starts with, this is a book.
Is that actually happening?
This is a book with two moms. And it's just a gradual curiosity that could leverage and break away that child from the root in the home.
I feel like this is a common thing in America. Like people just like are more about centering about what is happening in their homes and all that. That whenever the world try to introduce them something new, then they're saying like, oh, you're taking my child away, you're breaking the roots in your home. Like, no, we're exposing your kids. I'm gonna use the example of college. Like, before you go to college, you're abide by your parents. You have your own, set principles set in your household. You have your own belief systems. Oftentimes, many people grow up in conservative households, especially if you live in Texas. And I especially see this in a lot of my friends who, said, like, before this, I would have voted, red. Now I vote blue. Now I'm more of, like, understand, like, more of, like, what Black Lives Matter mean and police brutality and all that stuff. And, they kind of understand that what their family was teaching them was wrong, and it was just like their own viewpoint of the world. And when they got exposed to different mindsets, different perspectives, they debated with different perspectives.
Affirmative action is racial discrimination.
Oh Lord, this is hot. Yo. Oh, they finna have a field day with this.
The street from where I live in Los Angeles that encouraged all the kids of color to apply for their school play. And only once all the kids of color received whatever positions they wanted, then the white kids could apply.
I mean, is there proof of this? Has people got any factual evidence, any receipts, show me the Carfax, because maybe your kids aren't good. I'm sorry. There was a reason why, people kept trying to prolong slavery or try to have Jim Crow or how to do this, because they were fear not only sharing certain things with, Black and brown people, but at certain points, Black and brown people had their own flourishing populations where they actually was able to do well. Like Black Wall Street, look it up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was destroyed in a race riot, after a Black man was accused of falsely, essaying a white woman. But before all that happened, it was a thriving population. Historians even said they were actually thriving better off than a lot of the white towns near it. And that's what I'm saying when it comes to affirmative action. I feel like people are so like, oh, you're taking away opportunities for white people and all that. Like, not necessarily. It's opening doors up for people who have been racially discriminated against. Like, you know, because whether you want to believe racism still exists, racism systematically still exists. Like, you know, people have like racial bias every day. And that goes for me. I might have racial bias against certain races, but a lot of people are not reflective upon that. That's what affirmative action was meant to be. Maybe a reflection like, hey, we have racial bias in us, and like, let's try to like counteract that. Now, is the best way? No, but at the end of the day, I think it's a good way to like give people equal opportunity.
It is racism. If you are taking a group of people and judging them on their race and setting them aside, giving them a special treatment, if you are uplifting a person or you are trying to suppress a person because of their race, that is racism.
It's crazy to me, you know, she a black woman. I'm not trying to call her a Candace Owen pick-me, but I just feel like, yeah, there's no racism against white people. Like, that's never going to exist. Like, racism is a white-only monopoly. And, you know, there's been lawsuits going around from Harvard to UT, my alma mater. Basically, a student was trying to say that she didn't get in, but she had all these other black students that got in because of affirmative action. And she actually lost her lawsuit. She was trying to say, well, I scored higher on the SATs than these other students, but, you know, I didn't get in. But in actuality, she didn't. It's not reverse racism. It's not black racism onto white people. Like, that doesn't exist.
Like, that's ridiculous. I pulled my oldest daughter out a public school in Florida.
How old is she, though?
Debates about pulling down statues and changing names, and some of the school board members and some of the activist groups were saying that black children could not learn because of names on buildings, and that is completely asinine to me.
What?
It basically says that because we have a higher level of melanin, somehow our brains don't work. And every other kid could walk into the building and get the education that they needed, but somehow not for you black children.
No one says like you can't get an education because Robert E. Lee's name is on the building. No one said that. What they're saying is we need to stop upholding racism. Cause like, why are we still clinging on to these Confederate names, to these Confederate statues? They lost the Civil War. Like, there's only another reason to have that, and they're still trying to uplift that Confederate pride and all that.
Well, I would like to say that affirmative action programs, the biggest beneficiary according to the data.
Yeah.
And this has been government data has been white women first and foremost.
Like, the biggest beneficiaries of any government actions and stuff is going to be white people. Like, all these welfare programs, like, you know, Reagan was trying to dismiss back in the day. They were trying to have all these black single moms on welfare and all that. More white people have benefited from welfare than black people. Like, traditionally, like, whenever you implement any programs and stuff, white people are going to benefit more off of that. Not only just because they make up most of the population in America, but traditionally it's just like, you know, we live in a white society. Like, you know, what people are trying to like implement in the government, they're going to make sure their own going to get most of it first.
Barack Obama's kids as a barometer for anything because they do have privilege.
Exactly.
Smith kids. But if we talk about Laquan Smith down the street that nobody knows, there will be some impediments based on his race.
Because here's the thing, like, everyone wants to use the example of like, oh, Obama black, like, he became president, you know, he's not oppressed. Like, it's just like, yeah, but he had different environments. He probably had more privilege than a lot of people growing up, or his parents gave him a lot more opportunity than what your average Joe down the street might get. It's funny to me that she was saying activists and people were trying to say that her kids are like, you know, they're trying to treat them as monoliths, as like they're oppressed, as if there are, you know, they don't have opportunities. But yet she assigns to the belief system that feels like, oh, well, Barack is the president, you know, Will Smith is an actor, you know, you got Lupita Nyong'o, like, she's like ahead, like, you can do whatever you want to, thinking that, you know, monolithically all black people have the same opportunity as actresses, as billionaires, Beyoncé's of the world.
But when it's institutional and structural, it does something totally different. And when the black wealth gap is 100 years behind the white wealth gap in America, it'll take 100 years to catch up.
Why do you think that's because of racism, though? You take one thing and say that is the cause for every person of color.
Like, I understand racism isn't the cause of everything. At some point, people on personal decisions like come into play, and it's just like, what are you doing with your life? Do something. But at the end of the day, data bears out that, you know, systematically black and brown people don't have wealth because they've been generally excluded from having wealth. And people think wealth is like getting a job and saving money or investing, all that. Wealth comes in many different ways. Like wealth is, giving your kids access to different networks. Wealth is more having like an accountant or having a hedge fund that does that for you and does it on a daily basis. That's their own job, to like funnel billions and billions of money into different, stocks, shortening stocks, lowering the value of stocks to make a quick buck. The conversation of wealth has excluded black people for many, many years, because the way our economic system right now is that, we can't have many wealthy people like at the top 1% or have that expanded past 1%, because who's going to be at the pyramid at the bottom to be able to do the work to make those 1% more wealthier? So yeah, of course, racism intersects with capitalism, and it's just like, it's a whole big mess that people need to understand. Wealth is not attainable by most people, and that's because you need skills, you need that knowledge, and you need that one golden opportunity to get you from this part of the fence to over the fence and get you to the path of building wealth. And that's something like not the average Joe can attain.
No, you're absolutely right. And there are outliers in every single community. There are very strong, members of the black community that are very affluent.
Exactly.
There are also a majority that live in poverty. And if we see a bunch of cities that are majority person of color, and we're trying to recognize why have these places stayed at a very stable poverty line. But there are systemic reasons to why these communities are like that. How would you say that?
I would say probably because of policies that are in those cities.
That's racist policy.
Racist policies, absolutely.
Hold on, we gotta define terms. When would you say that Watson Compton became the way that it is? Was it like that?
Disinvestment.
No, it's a growth.
No, I'm asking you.
From redlining policies that were enabled.
In California?
Yeah, absolutely. California.
Because even in blue states now, they have racist policies. So part of my research project I'm doing in my gap year on the side is that, we're looking at disinvestment, basically in terms of whenever white flight happened, in the 50s and 60s, and when white people were leaving to like suburbs and they were building all these highways and stuff, they're taking so much capital investment from urban communities that all that were left were black people. And when you align that with redlining, when you housing policy, housing discrimination, you get what you have now, all these cities that are crime ridden, and basically people of color. That came from policies that he is talking about right now, and that most people don't believe it because we don't have history. We don't teach this in schools.
I would never deny that.
All of these supposed solutions are actually hurting. Wouldn't a better solution be to teach our kids that we're all born in the image of God?
Oh, God.
We should all treat one another equally.
But here's the thing. Racism and politics have intersected with each other for many parts of the millennium. Like, you have the Constitution, basically all men are free and equal, have unalienable rights, and they're free in the image of God, as they were just talking about earlier. But people who signed those bills owned slaves for a time, even after they signed the bill. So obviously they didn't have, black, they didn't have women included with that number. They had only white men included in that.
Why don't we look at the families, the black families, who have done those amazing things in this country and study what they did to succeed, instead of just focusing on, black people are behind and we don't even know what to do. Well, why don't we just go and look, since you are a professor,
that ain't it, sis.
you go and look at what has worked.
Well, I would never just go to you and just look at you. And I'm sorry, it's just the reality of
that's
data.
data.
So what I share,
Data can be broken up in umpteen different ways.
It can, but not pure data.
You're a professor and you're saying that data cannot be manipulated? This is why my kids do not go to public school anymore.
I don't, and I'm glad they don't.
So what she's talking about is not data. That's just like propaganda. Like, data can be manipulated, data can be skewed in many different ways, but if you look at the actual research studies, if you actually look at the statistical analysis they use, the methodology, the premise behind it, the hypothesis, as well as like their actual foundings, not on CNN, not on Fox News, not on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Actually look at the actual study, look at the actual data. Understand, in America, we don't teach scientific literacy. Like, we don't teach many types of formal literacy, whether it be politics or public health especially, but that's your own interpretation that's like manipulating the data. And that's why you need to talk to professors. That's why you need to talk to people who do research and understand their interpretations of it to gain a better understanding. And another thing I just want to bring up is like she's really just reducing and dismissing not only public schools but also public intellectuals. Because her saying like, this is why I don't go to public school, I send my kids to private school. Yeah, good, you got money to send your kids to private school, you know, but at the end of the day, not many people have money. And I'm just like, people need to stop demeaning public schools and actually start investing and giving them more money to actually, you know, do the things that she would like to do.
I think it's interesting. I'm thinking of like an anecdotal story I have. Last year, the school that I taught at, Deep East Oakland, I served majority black and brown students.
Is the government telling them that they can and cannot succeed because of how high our property taxes are here, because we do not have school choice where they can take their dollars somewhere else. If you put those same families in redder districts in the country, like places in Florida and Texas or Virginia, where they have better options for their family, you would definitely see them be able to succeed.
And where black and brown children are still underperforming in schools?
I definitely wouldn't take their kids to the more redder states in Texas because obviously, you know, education is underfunded, but they're heavily underfunded in red counties. My hometown where my parents reside in right now, they just voted down a school bond to make a new like middle school because of overflow and overpopulation. Like more and more people are moving into the town, like more like apartments being put up. And they're still having this overcrowded high school and junior high, you know, that they're still using. And now they're thinking about putting like portable classrooms outside of it because they're trying to deal with the overflow and these teachers can't deal with it. And that's why a lot of people are leaving the profession. It's really underinvested in everywhere, not just in liberal cities, not just in red cities. Two, it's just one of those things where, you know, they're still going to underperform because pretty much, you know, when you go to private institutions, especially in wealthier white neighborhoods, they still have unconscious bias. They gonna still see your kids as like that trash from the other side of the town, and they're not gonna give your kids the same chances or the same, you know, respect as they see like kids, little Billy and little Sarah from down the street, you know, coming from a white picket fence and all that. Oh hell, yo, why? This is yo. The look on the guys, oh, he going back.
But if my mindset is that if we're going to trust teachers to mold our children's minds and educate them, they're there for 8 hours a day. We should also trust and kind of enable them to
Nah, because here's the saying, you good at one thing, but you ain't good at everything. Like, just because you good at teaching, just because you know how to mold kids' minds and all that, whatever you trying to teach your kids, at the end of the day, like, that doesn't mean you know how to carry a gun. That doesn't mean you know how to hold your temper. Parents might have a better idea of, like, you know, how to protect people, because at the end of the day, they're gonna protect their kids no matter what. But when you have a random stranger that you try to, you know, say like, oh, here's a gun, if something happens, pull the trigger, I'm telling you, majority of them are going to fold. Especially your school resource officers, as they come to find out with Uvalde, there was like 300 officials outside of the classroom literally for an hour, did not do nothing.
Why is America solely have that problem? I would say it's a gun culture problem.
Yep.
So if the idea is, you know, should we try to remove aspects of gun culture that really pervade in our society, should we do that, or should we just increase the amount of firearms we can have in every single space, just so that way we're properly ready for a gunfight? Arming teachers is a response measure to particular violence that goes on in our schools here in America. And personally, I think we should focus more towards solutions.
I agree.
To prevent these occurrences.
It's not
from
preventionary.
happening, rather than just implementing responses implying that these actions will occur.
Exactly.
As a parent, how would you feel knowing that you don't know which teachers have a gun, and you've had bad experiences with prior teachers?
What's up,
I feel the same
Marissa?
way about the guard in front of my kid's school. I don't really know the guard, but he's gone through training, and I presume that he knows what he's doing. And frankly, I feel the same way about a police officer.
You can have people well trained, but what is the content of that training? I feel like we make it too easy for police officers to be trained to be police officers. I think maybe 2 years it takes, maybe a year. I can't remember. It's different terms of certain places, but I feel like you need to have a college degree, or if you go to a 2-year trade school course on policing, like, it shouldn't be like this training course where it's just like you take it and now you're a police officer. I think it takes years and years of growing up with a culture and training to be able to do it. It should take longer for you to be a police officer than for you to go through college in 4 years and get a degree, because police officers have a lot of responsibility, not only public safety, but being public servants. If you don't have emotional and social intelligence to be able to say, like, you know, okay, this situation is crazy, I'm not just gonna pull out my gun unless it's absolutely necessary. And at the end of the day, we're gonna have more things, you know, not just school shootings, but also all the, you know, police officers killing, you know, members of the public, not even just black and brown people, but also white people too, until we get better training and get more prolonged training to build up that emotional and social awareness.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, because it really ties back to why I feel like we need to be careful about how much responsibility we're saddling teachers with teaching our kids values, right? On the one hand, the system is saying, trust our teachers, they know better than you parents. We should be able to teach them what they need to know about sexuality. On the other hand, you guys are admitting that many teachers are not really checked for mental issues. We don't really know what is happening in these classrooms.
I'm
We
not saying
don't
that
know about
teachers
what.
Hold up.
not checked. We very frequently have like professional development days where we got self-care. So I wouldn't say many by any means. And when I'm coming into the workplace, I'm not bringing in all my baggage. As to say, you know, you go into your work, you're not like, oh, I'm so depressed, my kid's this,
So
that.
why, if there is a teacher who is willing to step forward and will go through the training and will go through the screening, why not empower them to save our kids?
But in that, it could be flipped onto her. Like, you could just say that, oh, you're trying to say teachers need to have guns. Teachers should have a responsibility to protect your kids. But yeah, you can't trust them to talk about these things such as, you know, gender, sexuality, all this stuff in a respectful manner. In my personal opinion, I'd rather take them like teaching about how the way works now than just for them to be protectors, because for one, they're actually, you know how to teach subjects and know how to like make sure to do it in a way that it doesn't, you know, hinders anyone's development.
My thing, and why this question sort of enrages me, why are we asking teachers to carry guns?
Teachers are underpaid, teachers are overstressed, they're overworked, they have to take some of their work home into their own personal life, on vacations or holidays. Teachers don't often have a holiday only during the summer because they're so busy during the school year. Now you're asking them to carry a gun to be able, like, oh, you need to protect my kid's life. We're putting too much responsibility on teachers already. This is a reactionary response when this stuff can be prevented by having gun control, by having, you know, safer laws, red flag laws, really just investing in mental health services, because at the end of the day, mentally ill individuals are the ones shooting up these schools. And at the end of the day, we need to like start curbing.
That is ridiculous. If you 50 years ago were to look at a teacher and be like, hey, do you want to hold this gun with you? You know, like, you might need it. They're going to scratch their heads and look at you.
Critical race theory is anti-American.
Oh, dang. We got to the crux of the conversation.
Well, I'll go first. My daughter, same teacher actually, who was asking about her pronouns, she said that she was going to be introducing some race-themed books. My daughter recorded this conversation in class. So what proceeded to happen is she started to talk to the children in their, I guess, identity groups. Oh, as an African-American child, how are you discriminated against? As an Asian child, she went through all of except white people. It became total chaos in the classroom. There was no education going on here. They were just literally going at each other, talking about who was more oppressed.
I feel like that wouldn't be okay to group everyone up, because I feel like you're trying to create division among groups. But I understand what the teacher was trying to do, because she was having a conversation about race in America. Racism affects kids at an early age, because unfortunately we got cruddy adults that literally look down upon kids, you know, because of their race.
So they automatically assume, critical race theorists, that racism is embedded into every single thing.
Because it is.
How do you look a child, specifically a black child, in the eye and tell them, I'm sorry for you because of your skin color? There's no hope for you in the greatest country literally for them, because black Americans are the most successful black people in the entire world. And then turn around and look at a white child and say, sorry, you're responsible for the atrocities of 200 years ago.
We don't look back into why we can't. We look into why we can. And so when my family taught me, since I was a little girl, I can, I learned that I could. And that's why I think this country has empowered me so much. I want to see the same thing for kids of all colors in the United States. But if we're teaching them that there is no hope for them, and that people will always look at them in a different way, then how are they going to hear the message of I can? My question.
So my issue with this whole argument right here that, we're, telling kids to pity each other. We're telling kids like they're not going to amount to anything because of their race. Nowhere in civil rights history that people are saying like, oh, I'm black, I'm not going to succeed. There have been activists and leaders in movements and human rights issues and all that say like, hey, this is how we've been oppressed. This is how it still happens to this day. This is how it intersects to that. And this is what we want going forward. We want to have more opportunities and more things like that. Like, no one is telling your kids that they can't succeed because they're black. This is how, it still exists today. And for y'all to be able to live in a world where y'all have opportunity and stuff like that too, y'all need to really understand and have empathy for each other. That's what we're teaching. We're not teaching kids to be hopeless or be victims. We're not doing that. And I'm saying we because this is not just happening in teachers and education. This also happening with doctors, public health officials, in the field of medicine, healthcare, and community health. We're getting as much as backlash talking about health equity, investing in communities of color from people who are literally just saying like, oh, people need to get up off their butts and work. Like, y'all can buy into this American dream all y'all want to, but at the end of the day, there was 2 different Americas when this nation was founded. Actually 3 different Americas, because you got the white version of America that says like equality, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, all that stuff. You had the black America, where slavery was prevalent. And then you have the Native American America, which literally got their land stolen from them because Britain, the Western world saw this as a cash grab opportunity.
My question for liberal teachers is, do they think that it's the right place for them to impose liberal ideas in classrooms, knowing that they have many students who come from conservative families?
Yeah, I
and
agree.
I find that many of the schools have become
exposed.
battlegrounds for those kinds of ideas. And when teachers are bringing those issues to the classrooms, it's forcing families and conservative kids to have to address these issues.
Exactly.
And we believe that they're simply too young to deal with those kinds of complex matters at that age.
Nah, they ain't. Because here's the thing. Someone brought up a good point. We were talking about CRT, and a professor would join us in the conversation. This was my last year in undergrad. White parents are opposed to it because he had a theory that he feels like a lot of parents are going to be embarrassed that their kids realize that their parents were a part of this stuff, or a lot of grandma, memas, papas, they were like literally a part of the things that, they're learning about in history, and now they're being judged because now we view those things as racist. From a TikTok video, I have found out a leaked photo that Jerry Jones was a part of the Little Rock 9 protests. If you don't know what the Little Rock 9 is, they basically were 9 black students that were going to integrated school in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was called Central High, and basically white people were up in a fit, as with all things to do with integration after segregation. They were throwing insults, they were hurling things at them, they were spat on, basically cussed to their face, and Jerry Jones was seen just looking onward into it. And basically people were saying that, oh, he was just there, he was just looking curiously, whatever, he didn't know what was going on, he didn't really know the importance. As a white person in Little Rock, Arkansas, on 1957, when your school was being integrated, you would know the time, the place, the date, basically when they were coming, so that way you can protest it. He was there for a specific reason. A lot of people are opposed to learn about CRT, really not even CRT, just basic history in the classroom, because at the end of the day, then they will start looking at their mima, at their papas differently now. Teachers needed to do what they need to do, and they need to teach history and facts. And us trying to get rid of this from history, this is the reason.
Critical race theory is a theory that Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw and a bunch of former Harvard law students came up with, where they theorized that within certain American laws, racism is just embedded. And so I'm sorry for your experience, because you shouldn't have to go through that. Nobody should have to go through that. I don't tell my son you can't do anything. I have told my son you have to work twice as hard. I have to tell my son.
Exactly. Like, we've all had that conversation.
There's certain things you need to do to survive.
In my opinion, how I define myself as an American, right? I define myself as someone who is proud of my country, someone who can look at the mistakes that my country has made in the past and the things that are keeping other people oppressed, and recognize that these are still existing and that we need to work towards changing that. So I don't see how critical race theory can
this man just iron her.
Anti-American. because that's how I define American.
Don't completely disagree with your definition of it. As a woman that has dealt with sexism, I do definitely teach my daughters, like, as a girl in this country, it is going to be a different experience than your father had. But I don't think it's beneficial at all to kind of institute that victimhood in their long-term mentality, because then you actually start to see kids that are like, oh, well, they're different than me, so therefore their life could be better or worse than mine.
I don't believe that there's a victimhood to it. I think it's just kind of amplifying that, hey, this is the truth, this is what happens, and let's move forward with that. Having that knowledge to be able to kind of navigate through life is better than just, oh, well, I assume I'm the same as, you know, my white counterpart. Oh, why is she able to do this? Why does she have this opportunity that I don't have?
She hits the nail on the coffin.
But she has that opportunity.
They are the same, is what we're saying.
My opinion, this whole topic, I feel like school is a very complicated system because you need to have parents, you need to have curriculum, you need to have teachers, staff, everyone involved with each other to be able to best educate America, because it takes a village at the end of the day, whether people want to believe it or not. Me personally, I'm more side with the liberal teachers, obviously, because I'm a public health, progressive. I just feel like a lot of these parents who have misconceptions about what's being taught in schools or what a definition of teacher, what a definition of education system needs to be, is very skewed from what the reality is and what we actually need to have a better society, instead of just holding on to this ideas like, oh, this is my household, these are my conservative values, you're gonna follow by this, I don't want my child to learn from the world, the worldly view, when in fact to be able to do well in society and to be able to really be successful, you have to subscribe to that worldly view, and you have to let your kid leave the nest. I don't subscribe to parents being the best experts for their kids, because like I said, parents grew up in a different time. I feel like teachers as well as administrators as well as other people are best advocates for kids, because not really a component of blood, but they actually listen and get the kids what they need. But with that being said, this has been Jubilee, what parents think should be taught in schools. If you like what you see today, like, subscribe, comment for more notifications, all that wonderful good stuff. If you want to see more of my reaction videos to Jubilee and other topics, let me know, give me some suggestions. As always, you want to look at my last reaction video is right here to click on, so definitely go check that out. But with that being said, stay warm, stay frosty, wherever part of the country you're in right now, and peace out.